Scientists think that they have a new definitive way to tell the difference between male and females of certain dinosaur species. Welcome back to Paleopedia, and in the animal world, sex can be a difficult procedure. There's a lot of examples in the animal kingdom where the act of mating can be a very dangerous game for either the male or the female. In some cases, like with black widows, the females will often eat the males that they reproduce with, and that's one of the more extreme examples. Other cases of what would be considered rough mating procedures would be like in dogs, where they often will be stuck together during the mating process to ensure that mating is actually successful, and you can't actually separate them. It can actually be very dangerous to separate a mating pair of canines. Another case can be in ducks, like in mallard ducks. The female reproductive organ is in a counterclockwise spiral with a lot of dead end and pouches, whereas the male organ is clockwise spiraled and is seemingly because of an evolutionary arm race against forced copulation. For ducks, it seems to be a factor of females evolving a difficult channel, we can say, to prevent the unwanted coupling of some males. Only the strongest males would actually be able to successfully mate with a female duck, but there's a lot more information about that isn't necessary for this video. The point is that sex in animals can be a very dangerous, if not difficult, procedure to actually go through successfully, and that would likely have been the same for extinct species like dinosaurs. Obviously, with 99% of extinct species today, we know about them through their fossils, and obviously fossils are predominantly composed of hard tissues like teeth and bone. It's very rare for soft tissues like skin and organs to fossilize. Normally, they simply don't last long enough after death for the fossilization process to begin, let alone complete. There are cases where we have exceptionally well-preserved specimens with soft tissues, like the Boreopeltis skeleton, for example. But for the most part, with extinct animals, dinosaurs included, we generally only have hard tissues that have been fossilized, teeth and bones. And so it's very difficult to tell whether an uncovered specimen is a male or a female. There are ways to do it, but in some cases it's actually really difficult. Animals that have a high degree of sexual dimorphism when it comes to body size, like mammoths, are really easy for us to determine whether a specimen is a male or a female. But with dinosaurs, it's not as clear cut. But that is where the sheer act of mating itself may give us a very clear-cut way to identify at least some species of dinosaurs, specifically the hadrosaurs. Apparently, when it comes to hadrosaurs, or the duck-billed dinosaurs, a lot of individual specimens that have been uncovered will show signs of healed fracture wounds along the vertebrae of their tails. Now, finding injuries on dinosaur bones is not an uncommon thing. There's a lot of specimens that have injuries, fresh injuries that actually caused the death of the dinosaur, healed injuries from fights with other animals like T-Rex and Triceratops often have these, and even pathological sources like bone cancer. So while it's not uncommon to find dinosaurs with injuries in the fossils, it's interesting that for hadrosaurs, a lot of specimens have the same kind of healed injuries along their tailbones. So a team of researchers led by Filippo Bertozzo started looking at hadrosaur specimens that all had the same kind of injuries along their tails to try and come up with a cause for the similarity to the injuries. After examining roughly 500 individual vertebrae from hadrosaurs across Eurasia and North America, Bertozzo and his team discovered that these injuries are in the exact same spots on every individual specimen, regardless of the specimen's age or its location of discovery. This appears to suggest that across all of these different hadrosaur species around the world, they were all doing a similar behavior leading to similar injuries. The team went through as many possible reasons for why these injuries were occurring worldwide and were able to eliminate a bunch. Like predation was ruled out because none of the injuries showed signs of bite marks around the fracture spot. Possible tail fighting was also ruled out because the injuries were on tops of the tail bones, not on the sides, where it would seem more likely that we would see injuries happening if the animals were using their tails as weapons and bludgeoning devices against each other. Using computerized models to determine the forces necessary to cause these injuries, the team found that the likely source of these injuries was caused by intense pressure put on the area around the cloaca, which for dinosaurs would be where the reproductive organs would be for males and females. Bertozzo and his team are now theorizing that all of these individual hadrosaurs that have these injuries are females that got these injuries during the mating process when males mounted them from the side and put intense pressure on their backs and tails. Now, while it might seem a bit counterproductive for the female of a species to receive potentially life-threatening injuries before she's able to successfully reproduce, it's important to note that even today, there's plenty of animals like sea lions and turtles where sex can be pretty dangerous, if not at least harmful potentially for the females. And the fact that these fractures typically show signs of healing indicates that the act of mating is not fatal for female hadrosaurs, and that the evolutionary cost of having to deal with this isn't really necessary for the species to survive. More significantly for Bertozzo, if this mating hypothesis is correct, then we can now infer that hadrosaurs with these injuries are females. Hadrosaurs without the injuries are likely males. If this is accepted as correct, then we'll be able to use this to actually look into other aspects of hadrosaur species. For example, in a lot of hadrosaurs like Parasaurolophus, Corythosaurus, Lambeosaurus, etc., a lot of them have flamboyant head crests. If we now know a male and a female hadrosaur apart from the tail injuries, we can look at the head crests of those specimens to determine if their head crests are sexually dimorphic, if females have smaller head crests than males, or potentially even vice versa, or if the head crests are all the same size, if the head crests themselves are just an aspect of individuality. Regardless of that, if this study is accepted, that's really cool, because we now will have a definitive way for at least hadrosaurs to tell the difference between a male and a female. Just goes to show what makes paleontology really, really fun, and I can't wait to see what comes out of this study in looking at other aspects of hadrosaurian life.